You're hanging out after hours with Matt Anderson, presented by Inside the Gamecocks.
Well, good evening, Gamecock fans everywhere. Excited to be back with y'all here Monday night live on YouTube. It's always fun to do this show, and really appreciate everybody hopping in here to have a good Gamecock chat. Really, basketball is, and specifically men's basketball, is what everybody in Gamecock land is talking about right now. We're going to talk a lot about it here tonight. Gamecocks had a pretty big win on the road at Georgia this past weekend on Saturday. It was a revenge game. We all remember the South Carolina-Georgia game at Colonial Life Arena early on in SEC play, and just how difficult of a game it was to watch. Gamecocks I think they had an 8 or 10 point lead in that game, and then something just flipped at the 11 to 12 minute mark of that game, and South Carolina couldn't make free throws. Georgia made a ton of free throws, and the refs were just calling fouls nonstop. I think that there were 48 fouls called in a 40-minute basketball game when South Carolina and Georgia played earlier this season, and South Carolina lost that game by 5 points. Gamecocks only have 3 losses on the season. The one against Clemson at Clemson, 5-point loss. The night that the Gamecocks had a lead on the road against Alabama at halftime, and the Gamecock offense just fell apart and just had one of those nights where nothing can go right in the second half. And then the 5-point loss to Georgia just a couple weeks ago. So revenge game for the Gamecocks. It was at Stedman Coliseum, so it was a road game for the Gamecocks. And look, Gamecocks found a way and they got it done. When I look at these games, I'm always talking about breaking this game into segments, whether it's each media timeout, what happened before and what's the situation at the timeout, because that's what the coaches are talking about during those media timeouts, or it's looking at the game in 10-minute segments. So in this game against Georgia on Saturday, if you break it out by those 10-minute segments, Georgia was winning 25-16 at the end of the first 10-minute segment, and they were hitting everything. I think Georgia hit 7 of their first 10 3-pointers. Gamecocks were making everything too, and there was a lot of times where Gamecocks didn't do anything wrong on defense. Georgia just hit shots. But then the game started to turn in that little second 10-minute period of the first half, and the Gamecocks outscored the Bulldogs 22-15 to make it a 2-point halftime deficit. And, I think the Gamecocks were at 53% from field goal percentage wise at halftime, and Georgia was, less than that, but they made 7 or 8 threes in the first half. And that was the difference. And I was texting in a group chat, and we were just kind of talking about how, look, if you're down by 2 points after you shot 53% from the field, had 16 makes and had 16 assists, and you're only down by 2 points, that just means that you played some daggum good basketball. And at the end of the first half, the score was 40-38, Georgia Bulldogs. Well, the second half was all South Carolina. Georgia didn't hit a single 3-pointer in the second half, only scored 22 points in the second half. Gamecocks won 72-62, so they got another double-digit road victory in the SEC, which is never easy to do. So just looking at the game, you can kind of see where the Gamecocks turned it on. I mean, I love KenPom, and South Carolina's largest lead in the game was 71-59 with 1:20 left in the game. But their minimum win probability, according to KenPom, was 20.7%, and that's when the Gamecocks trailed 29-19 with 8 minutes to go in the first half. So Gamecocks outscored Georgia by 8 points that last 8-minute stretch run. And if you think about the segments I talk about, you had a timeout around 8 minutes, you had a timeout around 4 minutes, and South Carolina began to make the adjustments. Second half, Gamecocks just played their offense. You look at the box score here. The Gamecocks were 22 of 36 from the 2-point field goal range, so 61%. They were 7 of 20 from the 3-point line for 35%, 7 of 11 from the free throw line. Had 34 rebounds to Georgia's 28, had 25 assists, which is an absurd number. 25 assists on 29 shots is something that you don't see very often. The Gamecocks limited their turnovers Only had 9 turnovers in the game, had 5 steals on the defensive end. Um, Personal fouls, we talked about how it was different in the first game at Colonial Life Arena. There were a total of 24 fouls called. So I think somebody at the SEC offices got the memo and heard the complaints, probably from both teams, probably more from South Carolina though. And the referees really let both teams play in this game. And if you let South Carolina play their brand of offense and their brand of defense, it's going to be really hard to beat them. So Gamecocks now are 19-3 overall, 7-2 on the season so far in SEC play, and they've surpassed their win total from last year with only 22 games played this season. So I was optimistic about the Gamecocks' chances, but even I did not see a 19-3 record at this point. I thought that the Gamecocks would probably be around 500 in SEC play. Right now, they're 7-2. So much farther ahead than where I thought they would be. And when you look at the game in particular against Georgia, Ken Palm does this thing where he gives you an MVP of the game, and Colin Murray Boyles was the MVP of the game. But I could have made an argument for Talon Cooper or Josh Gray to be MVP of the game. Talon finished with 10 points and 8 assists, really controlled the game yet again on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. 3 of 4 from the 3-point line for Talon, and all of them were timely made threes. You look at Josh Gray. Oh my gosh, 18 minutes played, and he had 16 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, 2 steals, only 1 personal foul in 27 minutes. I'm sorry, I need to go back. That was Colin Murray Boyle, who was the MVP. So Colin Murray Boyle played 27 minutes, 16 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, 2 steals, and 1 foul. That kid is just growing up before our eyes. And, there's a saying in sports that, about the halfway point of the season, freshmen aren't freshmen anymore. And Colin Murray Boyles is definitely not playing like your typical freshman. And I guarantee you, if there was a way to re-rank these kids at this point in the season, when you look at where they were as high school prospects, Colin Murray Boyles would be a 5-star. Just a diamond in the rough. I hate that he had this season kind of cut short at the beginning when he got mono. But, I mean, you look at that game against Clemson, which is the first game that Colin Murray Boyles was able to come back and play, and he was sped up. He had some bad turnovers in the game, but you saw his just oozing potential. And what he's doing right now is nothing short of phenomenal, in my opinion. Josh Gray, 18 points, 15 rebounds, or 18 minutes, 15 points, and 8 rebounds. Again, Josh Gray, it's like the light just flipped on for him, and someone told him that, you are big, you are tall, you are strong, you are athletic. Get up there and just dunk everything that you can. And he's done that. I was commenting in that same group chat with a couple of my friends that, Josh Gray looks different from a physical standpoint than he did at Garnet and Black Madness. He might have been somebody that was playing himself into shape as the season wore on. And I know from being around college basketball that, when you're not playing, over 15 minutes in a game or over 10 minutes in a game, one of the things that you are doing is conditioning. When the guys that played in the game don't necessarily have to do it as much because they just got their conditioning in through the course of the game. I think that he's probably gotten in some better shape because of that kind of post-game conditioning when he wasn't playing that much, probably motivated him a little bit as well. And I can't say enough about, how Lamont has coached him, how his teammates have lifted him up. And right now, Josh Gray has become not a focal point of the offense, but a vital piece of the offense. So really happy for him. BJ Mack didn't really have his best game against Georgia. I think he still finished with BJ had 9 points, only had 1 rebound. It really wasn't his day. And it kind of wasn't his day either against Georgia the first time they played. Georgia's a really physical defense, and they have that one 7'1", 7'2" guy that's athletic and strong and agile. And he kind of gives BJ Mack fits when he just puts his hands straight up in the air, and BJ has nowhere to go with the ball. He just doesn't have that above the rim athleticism. So it was a game where it was a Colin Murray Boyles game and a Josh Gray game down low. Michi Johnson got into double figures as well with 11 points. Kind of got back on track from a 3-point line, 3 of 5 from long distance, 60%. When you have Talon and Michi combining for 6 3-pointers in the game with the other guys on the team that can shoot the three ball, South Carolina could have been much better, in this game as well. I mean, if you get up to like 40% from 3-point line, which is hard to do, but Gamecocks could have opened this up even more than they did if they hadn't fallen behind by 10 points early in the game. So obviously Gamecocks got that win, back-to-back road wins last week. Road wins in the SEC are hard to do. And when you beat a Tennessee on the road and you come back and beat Georgia by double digits, a team that you lost to earlier in the season, I guess the AP voters started to pay attention, because the big news right now in college basketball, really in ESPN, even in their weekly power rankings, they're the author of that article has had the South Carolina Gamecocks as the team of the week, back-to-back weeks. So they're getting a lot of positive publicity and positive press throughout the country by the national media guys, which is something that, hasn't happened in a long time for the Gamecocks. And, the whole rank us cowards thing, where the Gamecocks should have been ranked last week. They really should have been ranked last week, but they weren't. 26th in the AP poll. This week, South Carolina made a really big jump, going from 26th in the poll, which, not a top 25 team, but the first team out of the poll, according to votes. South Carolina jumped all the way up to 15th in the country. And after the Georgia game, there were some threads there was at least one thread on the Big Spur that was kind of predicting where the Gamecocks would fall in the poll. I thought they would probably be around. My prediction was 14th. I think the Gamecocks, might be playing better, and I have data to show that the Gamecocks are playing better than the 14th best team in the country right now. But with the entire body of work and the Gamecocks with 3 losses and having to kind of climb from the cellar of college basketball, literally being predicted to finish last in the SEC by the SEC media. They were going to have to do something special to get ranked. And I'm so proud of this team, and I'm so happy for this team to get the credit that they deserve, being 15th in the AP poll. Coaches poll, 20th in the country. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I don't put a heck of a lot of stock into the coaches poll. Coaches poll, it isn't the head coaches in the country that are filling this out. There's a director of basketball operations, a D-ops guy. It might be someone on the support staff, but these coaches are not, putting their ballot in at all around the country. They have way too much to do as far as practice, game planning, preparing for practice, preparing for games, team meetings, all of that. Like, these coaches are not ranking South Carolina 20th in the country. And you'll often see too that, the coaches poll, especially, and the AP poll too, what you see is, teams are really slow to get credit, and the teams that have been traditionally kind of blue bloods tend to stay in the rankings longer and get more positive momentum after wins and losses, because teams are looking at their records and what they've done this week. People are paying attention to Duke every week. They're not paying attention to South Carolina every week. And unfortunately, that's just a fact of life in college basketball. I did see some stuff, and we'll talk plenty of bracketology here in a little bit. CBS Sports had the Gamecocks, I believe, their bracketologist, Jerry Palm, as a 3 seed in his projected bracket that was released today. I can make a very good case that South Carolina should be a 3 seed. Absolutely in the realm of possibility with body of work so far this year. Gamecocks are obviously there. And the computer metrics take a little bit of time, and the way the Gamecocks play basketball, the Gamecocks aren't trying to beat teams by 20 or 30 points on a routine basis. They're trying to win the game first and foremost every single time. But oftentimes, the way the Gamecocks play basketball and the way they wear their opponents down, it does lead to 10 plus point victories. But I think that last I saw, and I think it was, I can't remember who said it. It might have been Mike Morgan, or it might have just been on the broadcast. I don't remember. But Joe Lenardi said the Gamecocks would be at least a 6 seed at worst if they were able to hold on and beat Georgia. Gamecocks, I would probably have the Gamecocks in that 3 to 5 seed range right now. If I was doing it, I could make a case for any of that, any of those seeds to be in play for the Gamecocks. Gamecocks, can't rest on their laurels though. You look at the rest of the season, the Gamecocks, like we've talked about, are 19-3, 7-2 in the SEC. Right now, this Gamecock fans are always slow for this. They're always waiting for the other shoe to drop and just say, one game at a time, or, how many games can we possibly lose to stay in the NCAA tournament or be in the NCAA tournament? Right now at 19-3 and 7-2, they have 5 home games left. They have 4 road games. This week is pretty good to the Gamecocks. Obviously, there's a big game tomorrow night at Colonial Life Arena. I will be there. That is a quad 2 game against Ole Miss. And then this weekend, the Gamecocks host Vanderbilt on Saturday, which is a quad 4 game. So the Gamecocks actually have 3 of their next 5 games and 3 of their next 4 games at home. When you look at that schedule, it's February 6th at home against Ole Miss, February 10th, home against Vanderbilt, on the road on Valentine's Day at Auburn. And then on February 17th, they will host the LSU Tigers at Colonial Life Arena. So just looking at this right now, and Gamecocks have 5 more quad 1 games, 2 more quad 2 games, 1 more quad 3, and 1 more quad 4. 2 of those quad 1 games are against quad 1A opponents, which means the top half of quad 1. Those are, really, really good opportunities for South Carolina to get more seed bump line wins. So when I say seed bump, I mean, if they were a 6 seed in Joe Lunardi's bracket and they get a quad 1A win, they're probably going to be a 4 or 5 seed. That's a big enough jump. But when it comes to what Gamecock fans need to hope for South Carolina basketball as we kind of finish out the season, obviously every team that's been on the Gamecock schedule so far, you want them to win their games. You want that to happen. The Gamecocks play Ole Miss twice the rest of the way, and then they have a couple other teams they play twice this season. Anytime you play a team twice, you really want that team to be good because it just gives you more opportunities to win games. But on top of that, South Carolina fans just need to continue to pull for the Gamecocks and have fun with this. I mean, this is now a ride of, not are the Gamecocks going to make the NCAA tournament, but how high can they go? Right now, when you look at it, like really got to avoid, losing any quad 3 or quad 4 games. There's only 2 of them left. And of those 2 games, both of those games are at home. So both those games are at home. That's a good thing for the Gamecocks. Can't drop them. Absolutely can't drop them. You don't want to give a reason for the selection committee to drop you a seed line. But just some quick notes for you. And I found this pretty interesting. According to BartTorvik.com, which is, an advanced analytics site, I know what people think about the metrics, but I think it's pretty valuable information. According to Bart Torvik, the Gamecocks opened the season ranked 100 or ranked 111th in his rating system. Currently, the Gamecocks are ranked 41st in his rating system, so they're getting big bumps. I mean, that's a jump of 60, 70, 70 spots. So if you want to hate on the metrics, appreciate Bart Torvik. But what was really interesting is since January 1st, so you're only counting games from January 1st until today, or pretty much through yesterday, which was February 4th, he has the Gamecocks ranked as the 26th best team in the country. Now, obviously, you're talking about essentially a month and 4 days worth of basketball, so it's a small sample size. But if you were to go back and look from January 17th, and the reason I picked that date was just because it was a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday on the calendar. And, you usually have a Tuesday, Wednesday game for the Gamecocks and then a Saturday game. The Gamecocks are actually ranked 8th in the country, according to Bart Torvik, since January 17th. And, yeah, it's a small sample size. But, when you talk about those early season non-conference games that are kind of hurting the Gamecocks where, they beat Charleston Southern by like 4 or 5 points. They didn't really stretch out wins that could have been 30-point wins. When you just look at the metrics since January 17th, it says the Gamecocks are the 8th best team in the country, which I think is pretty cool. So Gamecocks are doing well. I see we got some stuff in the chat box here. I'm going to completely ignore Jamie Newton. If you guys want to try and get $5,000 from him, go ahead. I see that Jesse Carter on Facebook. I think these are bots, y'all. He says alive. So happy for you, Jesse. Jamie, if you want to throw $5,000 my way, go ahead. Let's see. So Jay Diz says, all polls aren't great because it does help being a top 25 team. Yeah, and Lamont said it. And, you talk to a lot of these national media folks and, especially the guys on the SEC network. And Mike Morgan's awesome. And I love Mike to death. And he talks about the polls don't matter. And he's a media member. But, Lamont Pierce did say that he knows how the selection committee works. And it's important to have, a top 25 number by your name as often as possible, because these selection committee folks, when they're not at the summit or they're not, bracketing the bracket, they're oftentimes not looking at every Division I game in the country every single day. They might just scan the top 25 results. And the more that they see South Carolina there, the more South Carolina gets ingrained into their mind to take a deeper look at them. So, the polls aren't fun. I don't really like college football polls. I mean, I don't think that in any sport you should have a poll until at least 6. In college football, I would say, week 4, week 5, week 6, kind of like what they do with the college football selection committee and the playoff stuff that they show on the playoff rankings. I think that's probably a good time to actually start caring about it. In college basketball, I really don't think that you should have a poll until about 6 weeks into the season, because undoubtedly you have a team like Michigan State, and I'm picking on them because they're recent. Syracuse has been another team like that has been a top 25 team that's lost to a nobody, and they get dinged a little bit, but they don't actually fall out of the rankings. And then they win 2 or 3 games, and they crawl back up, because these media members are creatures of habit. I think that you really shouldn't have a college basketball poll until about 6 weeks are in the books, and you have some marquee non-conference games, and you kind of see how teams are playing against their opponents in the non-con. So I think that's when the polls should start. But the dirty little secret about the media and these preseason polls and the week 1 poll and the week 2 poll is they generate a lot of clicks and a lot of conversation, and that's what these media members want. Kayshawn Brunson says, do you think we have a chance to win the SEC? I absolutely think that the Gamecocks have a chance to win the SEC. They're only 1 game back right now. And you look, they have 5 games at home, 4 games on the road. And, is it difficult that you have 5 quad 1 games and 2 quad 2 games? So 7 of your last 9 games are against quad 1 and quad 2 opponents. Yeah, that's hard, but the Gamecocks have proven that they can beat those types of teams. And, after the break here in a little bit, I'll kind of break down why I do feel that way. But yeah, the Gamecocks are a game out, and they still, I think, let me look that up really quick. I think that Auburn's at the top of the SEC standings. Let me look that up for you. And I guarantee you Phil will beat me to it. He always beats me to it. But yeah, looking at the SEC right now, Alabama is 8-1 in the league. South Carolina is 7-2 in the league. Auburn 7-2, and Tennessee 6-2. Then you have some teams that have 5 wins. Ole Miss, Kentucky, Florida, those types of teams. But you're really seeing a separation now. And I think that this SEC race probably comes down to Alabama, South Carolina, Auburn, and Tennessee. Gamecocks, unfortunately, do not have an opportunity to face Alabama again this year, but they do play Auburn on the road. They play Tennessee at home. They got Ole Miss twice. They've already beat Kentucky once this year. Kentucky's kind of in scramble mode right now. And then they have the Florida Gators also at home. So when you look at the teams the Gamecocks are kind of surrounded by in the SEC standings, start thinking about an SEC championship, because it's a realistic possibility with the way the team's playing right now. Jay Diz says the football team beat UCF, their only loss of the season at UCF, and dropped 2 spots in the AP polls. Yeah, the AP polls are pretty garbage. Bryant said that's the largest microphone I've ever seen. Yeah, it's actually not that big. It's got this little, I don't know, it's got like a boom arm, and this thing's supposed to help calibrate the sound. I've had this for a couple of years now. It's not my first podcast rodeo, but I do like the mic. I mean, the whole setup was like $225 from Best Buy a couple of years back, but I love it. Jay Diz says it shouldn't matter where you start. That's exactly why polls are biased. Yeah, for sure. Jesse Carter says Gamecock Nation all the way. Yeah, got to pull for the Gamecocks. And Cynical Aries, hello Matt and all, go Gamecocks. Yeah. How are you doing tonight, Cynical Aries? Yeah, appreciate you guys all popping in and being a part of the show tonight. Let's actually take a quick break, because I do want to talk about the upcoming schedule a little bit, and I do have some data here that I have an Excel spreadsheet that I think will give a lot of value to you guys and gals while you're looking over what the Gamecocks have accomplished so far, where they can go, and how high they can go in the March Madness bracket and seeding. So, Phil, how about a word from our partners?
Chicken cock originated in Kentucky, like so many other bourbons. And so the resurrection of it, Paris, Kentucky, that's the county seat of Bourbon County. So much of this whiskey was being made in that Bourbon County, put on ships and barges and shipped down to Ohio, down to Mississippi, and got to New Orleans, where it got distributed all over the world. And people kept saying, well, hey, I want some more of that whiskey from Bourbon County. And so that's how bourbon whiskey got its name. And chicken cock originated actually in Paris, Kentucky, which is today Bourbon County.
All right. Let's make sure. Yeah, I'm unmuted. All right. So always appreciate that word from Chicken Cock. If you haven't had some yet, make sure you go on the Chief Sports Network app and go to the Chicken Cock whiskey logo, and you can find out where you can get it close to you. Gotta love the Chicken Cock whiskey, and it's really fun play on words there with South Carolina and the Gamecocks. But really quick, I do want to talk briefly about the AP poll. There's a website called collegepolltracker.com that you can go to, and you can actually look at where each AP voter voted for each team that they voted for the top 25. So long story short, there are a number of these writers, and media members, four AP voters, and I don't know how this happened. I know how it happened for at least one. But Seth Davis, Bruce Pascal, Brian Holland, and Bryce Cherry all failed to rank the Gamecocks in their AP ballot this past week. Seth Davis, he got it. He got it big time from Gamecock fans on social media, and he actually eventually apologized and said it was an oversight and make sure he'd rank the Gamecocks next week. But when you look at the Gamecocks 15th in the country and you have four AP voters that completely left the Gamecocks off of their ballot, it's kind of inexcusable. Interesting enough, the highest media member that gave the Gamecocks, the highest slot in their bracket was Dylan Sin. So we'll give Dylan Sin a big shout out. He had the Gamecocks 5th in his bracket. David Jablonski had the Gamecocks 6th. There were 7 folks at the Gamecocks 7th in the country. John Rothstein, who's been a big Gamecock supporter so far this year, had the Gamecocks 8th. And then you got a couple 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And predominantly they were ranked, these AP voters had the Gamecocks around 13 to, we'll call it like 18th in the country. So Dick Vitale, who's been big for the Gamecocks on social media, had the Gamecocks at 20th. I hope Dickie V is still the one that's putting out his media AP ballot, excuse me, every single week. But so the Gamecocks are looking pretty good right now. I want to look at the next 3 games in particular. Gamecocks have Ole Miss at home tomorrow night, 6:30. I'm pretty sure that they're planning for a sellout. So if you haven't got your tickets yet, make sure you do. I was on Vivid Seats earlier today, excuse me, and saw that the Gamecocks were still had some tickets in the upper deck at reasonable prices. I think I saw some $11, some $13, on up, and then down the lower bowl, I think the cheapest seat that I saw was like $40 or $45. So if you're around Columbia and you can get there, highly recommend that you guys go to the game tomorrow night. But the Gamecocks do play Ole Miss tomorrow. Ole Miss is another team I think is like 19-3 or 17-4 so far this season. Yeah, 18-4, and they're 5-4 in SEC play. This is a game that Ole Miss has circled, not only because the Gamecocks are now ranked 15th in the country, but they actually have South Carolina on the road tomorrow, and then they have week off Tuesday to Tuesday, and then they go on the road against Kentucky. So Ole Miss is going to need to have one of these 2 road wins, and we all know Kentucky's reeling, but you're essentially a week away from having to go into Rupp Arena, and Kentucky. I don't know if they can get out of their funk, but it'd be great for the Gamecocks if they did. The Gamecocks have they beat Kentucky soundly. More than anybody else has beat Kentucky this year. But just looking at Ole Miss's schedule, they have Kentucky, then they have Missouri, then they have Mississippi State. So 3 of their next 4 games are road games. So they're going to be fired up and trying to get a win. If you look at KenPom has the Gamecocks projected to win 72-67. So always good when the computer analytics folks are looking at you and giving you the 5-point win there. And then Vanderbilt, before Vanderbilt travels to South Carolina Saturday, they will actually host Kentucky in Nashville. So Vanderbilt finally got their first win in SEC play, beating Missouri 68-61. And we'll talk more about this on Thursday or Friday's show, the Vanderbilt game. And then you go forward and you look at the Auburn game on Valentine's. Auburn has a really tough stretch here. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you Auburn's next 5 games. They are home against Alabama. They travel to Florida. They host South Carolina February 14th. Then they host Kentucky on February 17th. And then they have to go to Georgia. And then after that, on February 28th, you have Auburn has to travel to Tennessee. So we're going to see what Auburn's all about right now. I think Auburn only has 1 quad 1 victory. So, don't ever count the Gamecocks out now. I mean, KenPom and the metrics didn't have them beating Kentucky or Tennessee. And guess what the Gamecocks did? They went out there and got it done. So I'm really excited for the Gamecocks. I did want to talk a little bit about the net here. When you look at the net, South Carolina is currently ranked 38th in the net. And I always try and remind folks that, don't look at the net as this be-all, end-all. The net really isn't used as a criteria for getting into the NCAA tournament. And it's going to be wonky going forward because, you can go back and look at since the net came into existence, what is the lowest rated net team to get into the NCAA tournament. And I think that I've seen 68 or 70 or something like that. But it's all about what you do inside the net, the quadrant. So quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, quad 4. But South Carolina is 38th in the net. When you look at the 2 metrics that are, production based, what have you done on the season, not like the efficiency numbers and what are you projected to do. KPI and strength of record, South Carolina sits at 15th in KPI and 8th in strength of record. Really, really good numbers. Really, really good numbers. So with the KPI, essentially what they're doing is they're looking at who have you played, what is their strength of schedule, how good are they versus how good you are, and how many points did you beat them by. So a KPI score of 15th is really good, and then a strength of record score of number 8 is also a really, really good ranking. The committee will look at your road record and your neutral site game record. South Carolina is a sterling 8-2 in road and neutral court games this season. When you look at the average net loss, so average net loss just means, okay, if you look at all the losses that a team has so far in a season, what is the average ranking of that team that you lost to? Well, South Carolina's is 43. So the Gamecocks have lost 3 times, but none of those are bad losses. Even the Georgia loss really isn't that awful of a loss. It's definitely dragging down the loss because, Alabama in the net right now is 5th in the country. Clemson's 37th. And, the Georgia one, I think Georgia's 68 or 78 or something. So that's how you get to that 43 number. But one of the big things is the Gamecocks are 3-2 in quad 1 wins. So they win 60% of their quad 1 opportunities. In quad 2, the Gamecocks are a perfect 4-0, winning 100% of their quad 2 opportunities. Total quad 1 and quad 2 wins are 7. They have 7 of those wins so far. And that's good for winning 77.8% of their quad 1 and quad 2 games so far this season. The only blemish that the Gamecocks really have is that one loss to Georgia. That's a quad 3. But if Georgia can, stop giving up these late second half leads, there's no reason that Georgia game might bump up to a quad 2 game, which would be just a little bit better. I mean, it would kind of hurt that win percentage in quad 1 and quad 2 games, but it gets rid of the quad 3 blemish. Gamecocks are perfect 8-0 in quad 4 games. And so I give you all of those numbers just to tell you this really quick. If you look at the teams in the country that have the most quad 1 and quad 2 wins, you would imagine it's kind of crazy that Purdue has 15 wins against quad 1 and quad 2 opponents. Connecticut has 11. Wisconsin has 10. Tennessee 9. North Carolina 9. So, those 5 teams have kind of separated themselves, especially Purdue. And that's why you're going to see Purdue as, like, if the season ended right now, Purdue would be your number 1 overall national seed, despite being number 2 in the AP poll. Connecticut would be a 1 seed. I don't know if Tennessee would be. North Carolina might be. Houston probably would be. But you probably got about, I'd say, 10 teams in line for a 1 or 2 seed right now in college basketball. But I say this to say, if you just to point out, South Carolina right now has 7 quad 1 and quad 2 wins, but they have a 77.8 win percentage in those games. So if you go to the largest win percentage, again, quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities so far this season, Purdue has won 88.2% of their quad 1 and quad 2 games. Connecticut has won 84.6% of their quad 1 and quad 2 games. And then South Carolina, number 3 in the country in quad 1 and quad 2 win percentage at 77.8%. So, and there are a lot of teams there, let's see. There are, how many is that? There are 6 teams in the country that have won between 70 and 77.8% of their quad 1 and quad 2 games. And if you just look at that, that means, you can make the argument for the Gamecocks as a 3 seed because you can only beat the teams that are on your schedule and the teams that you can play. It gets more and more difficult to, you can't win games that didn't happen, right? But every time the Gamecocks have had the opportunity to play a quad 1 or quad 2 game, that they have the 3rd highest win percentage in the country. So that's how you're seeing the Gamecocks as a 3 seed in CBS's bracketology. And Joe Lunardi is going to be a little slower than a lot of other folks because he does like strength of schedule, and he's going to look at South Carolina's strength of schedule and say, well, I can't guarantee you that South Carolina will win 77% of their quad 1 and quad 2 games. He's going to let all this play out, and he's going to see where the Gamecocks finish the season. And with 7 more opportunities, Joe Lunardi is going to have the opportunity to be right with more information. So that's what he's doing. But if you just looked right now, the Gamecocks have I completely understand the 3 seed on CBSSports.com, even though I would probably have the Gamecocks in that 4 to 5 seed range. I probably do lean a little bit too on strength of schedule. But you look at that 8-2 record in non-conference. Let's go. I want to see what's the highest here. So Purdue's 10-2 in those opportunities, road neutral games. Connecticut's 8-2, South Carolina's 8-2, Florida Atlantic's 9-3. But there aren't very many teams that have 8 wins on road or neutral site games this year. Just looking through here, there might only be 5 or 6 teams like that in the country right now. So you have really, really good numbers for South Carolina when it comes to a bracketology standpoint. And I think tomorrow Joe Lunardi will probably come out with his bracketology if he hasn't already. And bracketmatrix.com is another website you can go to that everybody that submits a bracket on the internet that's tracked and stuff, you'll see where the Gamecocks average out there. Looking at these computer numbers again really quick, Gamecocks are projected to be an 8 seed according to Bart Torvik. But Bart Torvik, if you asked him yourself, he'd probably say the Gamecocks are probably in that 5 to 6 range as things stand right now. But the computer metrics oftentimes are predictive in nature. So he has the Gamecocks. I'll go ahead and tell you. He has the Gamecocks winning 1, 2, 3, 4 more games the rest of the way. So he has them going 4 and 5. If the Gamecocks go 4 and 5, that might be, a 7, 8, 9 seed. But he's been wrong at least 3 times so far this season on what he predicted. His computer predicted, I should say. So a lot to be excited about for South Carolina. I think that the Gamecocks are going to continue to, just fight and claw their way to more and more victories in the SEC. Definite opportunity for an SEC championship. Lamont Paris is the runaway leader for SEC Coach of the Year. Very, very likely National Coach of the Year as well. Gamecocks take care of business with these two games at home this week. Get to 21-3. Gamecocks will probably move into that top 12, top 10 range in the media polls, and then a big opportunity at Auburn. And we talked about Auburn only having 1 quad win quad one win on the season. And I just want to pull up Auburn's numbers really quick so we can talk about that game, because that's a big game that Gamecock fans will have circled. But yeah, Auburn is 1-3 in quad one opportunities and 5-1 in quad two opportunities. So Auburn actually has less wins against quad one and quad two than South Carolina does, despite being higher in the net rating system. So Gamecocks have big opportunity here. Three of their next four are at home. 3 of their next 5 are at home. And then you have 2 more home games in March, Florida and Tennessee. Those are seed line games. Those are big games. And South Carolina's not going anywhere. Just for all the folks that get a little worried, I'm still not drinking the Kool-Aid yet on the Gamecocks. Bart Torvik has the Gamecocks with a 94% odds to make the NCAA tournament. So it'd be unthinkable for the Gamecocks to miss out on the tournament. And then they'll probably be a pretty high seed. And, we all know that the Gamecocks have the opportunity to potentially go to Greenville in first and second, or is it Greenville this year? I can't remember Charlotte. It's in Charlotte. First and second round games are in Charlotte this year. And if the Gamecocks get a high enough seed, if they get in that top 4 seed range, they'll have an opportunity to stay really close to home. And they still could if they're not a top 4 seed. But just I'm fired up for it. It's been so much fun to cover. I cannot wait. I'll be at the game tomorrow night. I'll be at the Vanderbilt game. I'll be at the LSU game. I won't be able to go to the Florida game. I got a family wedding, so I'll miss that game. But if you get a chance, just go out to Clinton Life Arena. It's electric right now, and get there early. The game tomorrow is at 6:30 p.m. You're going to have some traffic, getting to the arena. When I was at the game against Missouri, I got there about 45 minutes ahead of time, and some lots were already closing. I had to park on Pulowski and get a meter. So, if you got to go to work tomorrow, try and get there a little bit earlier than you normally would, because you're going to have to find some parking. But get out there, get loud. It's a whiteout. Make sure you're wearing all white if you can. I don't know if you got to wear white pants, but wear a white shirt. We'll have a good time. If you see me at the game, come up and speak to me. I love talking sports, and I love talking Gamecocks with all of you. So I'll be there. Probably be wearing this hat. Looks like this in the front. So come find me if you see me tomorrow. I'd be happy to talk with you. So go Gamecocks. I know we only talked about men's basketball tonight, and it's kind of weird. The Lady Gamecocks, or the women's team, I should say, is number 1 in the country, and we're just so accustomed to the women's team being number 1 in the country. So we kind of take it for granted. But baseball season will be here before you know it. I think, February 16th is opening day. If you can get to that game, please do. They're going to do something very, very special for Tommy Moody before first pitch. So Tommy Moody, obviously just a Gamecock legend, and nobody loved the Gamecocks as much as Tommy Moody did. I'll put it that way. So get out there and get there for opening day. It'll be a lot of fun. I think you'll have the opportunity to go to opening day, and then the next day the Gamecocks will host LSU at home in basketball, and you'll have some more baseball on Saturday and more baseball on Sunday. So make it a big weekend. I think that the Florida home series too. That's the Florida home basketball game is the Clemson baseball series. So you have a chance to go watch two teams participate. Men's basketball and men's basketball and men's baseball. So really, really hope that you're enjoying this ride. I see Todd Gwynn down here says that he's enjoying the ride. Go Gamecocks. Jay Diz says CLA will be crazy. So happy for all the fans and the players. This will be a special time for South Carolina B-ball. Oh gosh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Kayshawn says, I think we have a chance to beat Auburn. I agree. South Carolina can beat anybody in the country. Anybody. Just put it that way. Jesse Carter says, fans since Frank McGuire with point guard John Roach. Before your time, I'm guessing. Yeah, before my time. I'm only 35. I'm 35. It's kind of old nowadays, but I try to be a young 35. So before my day, when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, that was the BJ Mackey and Larry Davis and Melvin Watson and Ryan Stack and Antonio Grant and Herbert Lee Davis and Nate Wilborn and George Formanacek. That's when I fell in love with Gamecock basketball. So I know all the old timers I talked to say, you had South Carolina was the basketball capital of the East, and UCLA was the basketball capital of the West. And that was during the Frank McGuire and John Roach days. I still hear stories if John Roach hadn't got hurt that year, that the Gamecocks would have won it all and had a national championship. And so hate that season ended that way. But y'all, thank y'all so much for joining me tonight. Like I say every show, when you join me, you guys and gals, you give me the most valuable thing you have, which is your time. It never goes underappreciated, and I'm very aware of what you all give me. So I thank you so much. And tomorrow night, CLA will be rocking. So I hope to see y'all there. But with that being said, let's call it a night. Go get some rest and get ready to cheer tomorrow for the Gamecocks. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.